The morning air at Walnut Ridge Farm smelled like frost and turned earth. Sybil Blackwood stood beside her husband's casket, her navy coat buttoned tight against the November wind, her hands folded over a worn leather hymnal that had belonged to Kenneth's mother. Around her, 40-some people from Millbrook gathered on folding chairs beneath the bare walnut trees, the same trees Kenneth had planted with his own hands 40 years ago, back when this land was nothing but wild grass and stone. Pastor Morris was finishing the benediction when Sybil heard it, the low purr of an expensive engine coming up the gravel drive. Her spine stiffened. She knew that sound didn't belong here. A black Mercedes sedan rolled to a stop near the old barn, too polished, too clean. The door opened and Jasper stepped out. 5 years, not a word, not a call, not a single card at Christmas. And now here he was, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than a season's harvest, his dark hair slicked back, his face blank as a courthouse wall. Sybil's breath caught. For just a moment, one foolish, hopeful moment, she thought maybe he'd come to mourn. Maybe he'd finally come home. Then she saw the woman, blonde, mid-30s, stepping out from the passenger side in heels too high for farmland. She carried a leather briefcase and wore sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Behind them, a third man emerged. Older, gray suit, the unmistakable posture of a lawyer. Sybil's hands tightened on the hymnal. Pastor Morris said amen, and the small crowd murmured it back. People began to stand, stretching their backs, speaking in low voices. Gloria Patterson, Sybil's oldest friend, leaned close and whispered, "Is that?" "Yes," Sybil said quietly. Jasper didn't approach. He stood by the car, waiting, watching. The blonde woman said something to him. He nodded once. The mourners filed past Sybil, offering condolences. She shook hands, accepted hugs, said thank you 40 times in 10 minutes. But her eyes kept drifting to her son, standing 20 yards away like a stranger at a funeral he hadn't been invited to. When the last of the neighbors had gone, when even Gloria had reluctantly driven off with a promise to call later, Jasper finally walked over. He stopped 3 feet from the casket. Didn't touch it, didn't bow his head, just looked at it the way you'd look at a car you were thinking about buying. "Mother," he said. Not Mom, not Mama, just Mother, formal and cold. "Jasper." Silence stretched between them like the 5 years that had passed. Sybil could see faint lines around his eyes now, a hardness in his jaw that hadn't been there before. He'd grown older, so had she. The blonde woman approached, heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. She didn't introduce herself. She simply pulled an envelope from her briefcase and held it out. "Mrs. Blackwood," she said, her voice smooth and businesslike. "I'm Vanessa Sterling. I represent Mr. Blackwood in matters concerning the estate." Sybil didn't take the envelope. "This is a funeral." "I understand," Vanessa said, not unkindly. "But there are time-sensitive legal matters that need to be addressed. This is a formal notice of claim regarding the property." Jasper still hadn't spoken again. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed somewhere over Sybil's shoulder, like he couldn't quite bring himself to look at her face. Sybil took the envelope. It was heavy, official. She didn't open it. "Your father left everything to me," she said quietly, looking at her son. "Everything." "I don't believe that," Jasper said, his voice flat. "Dad wouldn't have cut me out completely." "You cut yourself out," Sybil replied. 5 years ago. Something flickered across Jasper's face. Anger, maybe, or shame. It was gone before she could be sure. "See you in court, Mother," he said. Then he turned and walked back to the car. Vanessa Sterling gave Sybil a thin smile. Not cruel, just professional, and followed. The lawyer never said a word. Sybil stood alone beside Kenneth's casket as the Mercedes drove away, the envelope heavy in her hand, the walnut trees standing witness around her like silent judges. She thought about the last time she'd seen Jasper. 5 years ago. The kitchen. The slap that had echoed through the house like a gunshot. She'd chosen silence then. She'd chosen to let him go. Now he was back, and this time she wouldn't be the one who walked away. November 2019. The kitchen had smelled like comfort that night. Chicken simmering in broth, dumplings soft and thick the way Kenneth used to make them, back before the Parkinsons took the steadiness from his hands. Sybil had spent all afternoon on that meal, chopping onions, rolling dough, trying to create something that felt like home. She'd set the table for two, lit a candle, folded napkins. Jasper had lost his third job in 8 months, and she'd thought maybe, just maybe, a good meal and a quiet conversation could help him find his way back. But the moment he walked into the kitchen, she knew she'd miscalculated. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw tight. He dropped his messenger bag on the floor with a thud that made the dishes rattle. The faint smell of whiskey clung to his clothes. "Sit down, baby," Sybil had said gently. "I made your favorite." Jasper sat. He stared at his plate, didn't pick up his fork. They ate in silence for 3 minutes. 5. "Have you thought about the position at Walker Industries?" Sybil finally asked, keeping her voice light. "Gloria's nephew works there. He said they're hiring electrical engineers." "You want to know why I can't get a job, Mama?" His voice was low, controlled, but there was something coiled beneath it. Something dangerous. "I was just suggesting, because I spent my whole life trying to make you happy." The words exploded across the table. Sybil flinched. The candle flame jumped. Jasper stood, his chair scraping hard against the floor. His hands were shaking. "You and Dad pushed me into engineering when I wanted to study design. I could have been a designer, Mama. I could have been happy. But no, you needed me to have a stable career and provide for a family and all that other garbage you fed me every single day." "Jasper, we never forced you into anything," Sybil said, her heart hammering. "You chose engineering yourself. You used to tell your father, 'That's what you tell yourself.'" He was shouting now, his face flushed. "You tell yourself you were supportive, that you let me choose. But you know what I remember? I remember you saying design was a nice hobby, but I needed to be realistic. I remember Dad saying, 'Son, you got to think about your future. Every damn day.'" He grabbed his plate and hurled it into the sink. Ceramic shattered. Pieces scattered across the counter, the floor. "Everything I did was for you, and look where it got me." Sybil stood slowly, her hands braced against the table. "Jasper, please. Let's just talk." "Don't!" He spun toward her, his eyes wild, his whole body trembling with rage and something else, something that looked almost like grief. "Don't call me baby. Don't tell me it'll be okay. Don't—" His hand moved before she could process it. The slap wasn't hard, not as hard as it could have been, but the sound cracked through the kitchen like thunder. Silence. Sybil's cheek burned. Her ears rang. She stood frozen, one hand rising slowly to her face. Jasper stared at his own hand, his eyes wide, his mouth open. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, neither of them moved. Then he ran, out of the kitchen, through the living room, out the front door. His truck's engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as he peeled out of the driveway. Sybil stood alone in the kitchen, her hand still pressed to her cheek, the ruins of dinner growing cold on the table. She didn't cry. Not then. She walked slowly to the sink, picked up the largest shard of broken plate, and set it carefully on the counter. Then she turned off the stove, blew out the candle, and sat down at the table. When Gloria called 20 minutes later, they'd had plans to watch a movie. Sybil answered on the 3rd ring. "Everything all right, honey?" "Everything's fine," Sybil said, her voice steady. "I'm just tired. Can we do it another night?" "Of course. You take care." Sybil hung up. She sat in the dark kitchen for another hour, listening to the house settle around her, before she finally went upstairs to bed. The next morning, Sybil woke to silence. Jasper's truck wasn't in the driveway. His bedroom door was open, the bed unmade but empty. She made coffee, fed the chickens, checked the fence line out by the south orchard, came back inside. Still no sign of him. By noon, she made a decision. She went upstairs to Jasper's room and began packing his things into cardboard boxes. Clothes, books, the engineering textbooks he'd never opened after graduation, the framed photo of him and Kenneth fixing the old tractor when Jasper was 12. She worked methodically, without emotion, folding each shirt, wrapping each item. By evening, the room was bare except for the furniture. She carried the boxes down to the basement and stacked them against the wall. Then she closed the door to his room and didn't open it again. 5 years passed. Jasper never called, never wrote, never came back. For the first few months, Sybil jumped every time she heard a car on the road. But the cars always passed by. The phone never rang with his number. People in town asked, of course. "How's Jasper doing? When's he coming home for Christmas?" Sybil learned to smile and say, "He's finding his path." Only Gloria knew the truth. And Gloria, bless her, never pushed. Kenneth's Parkinson's progressed. Slowly at first, then faster. By 2022, he needed help with buttons, with eating, with walking across the room. Sybil became his hands, his steadiness, his anchor. She never told him what had happened that night in the kitchen. He'd asked about Jasper once, early on. "You two have a falling out?" "Something like that," Sybil had said. Kenneth had nodded slowly, his trembling hand reaching for hers. "He'll come back when he's ready." But Kenneth died in October 2024, quietly in his sleep, and Jasper never came. Sybil found Kenneth's journal in his workshop after he passed. The last entry, dated 3 weeks before his death, read simply, "Told Marcus to change the will. Everything to Syb. She earned it. Jasper made his choice." Sybil had sat in that workshop for an hour, the journal open on her lap, and finally let herself cry. The envelope Vanessa Sterling had given her sat unopened on the kitchen table for 2 days. Sybil knew what it said. Didn't need to read the legal jargon to understand. Jasper was claiming his inheritance. Jasper wanted half. On the 3rd day, she finally opened it. Notice of claim against the estate of Kenneth Blackwood. Claimant: Jasper Blackwood, sole biological heir. Claim 50% ownership of property located at 1847 Ridge Road, Millbrook, Vermont. Assessed value $2.4 million, based on rights of inheritance as only surviving child. The words blurred. Sybil set the papers down and picked up the phone. Marcus Dalton's office. "This is Sybil Blackwood. I need to see Marcus as soon as possible." Marcus Dalton's office. The next morning, Marcus was 72, bald as an egg, with kind eyes and hands that still shook slightly from a childhood bout with polio. He'd drawn up Kenneth's will, handled the farm's incorporation, witnessed both their signatures on 100 documents over the years. He read Jasper's claim in silence, his lips pressed into a thin line. "Well," he said finally, setting the papers aside. "This is disappointing." "Can he do this?" Sybil asked. "He can try." Marcus pulled out a thick folder. "Kenneth's will is airtight, Sybil. He left everything to you. Jasper isn't mentioned once. But Jasper can contest it. He'll claim undue influence, that you manipulated Kenneth in his final months. Or he'll argue Kenneth wasn't of sound mind because of the Parkinson's. Kenneth's mind was sharp until the end. I know, and we have medical records to prove it. Dr. Hughes documented every visit." Marcus folded his hands. "You'll win, eventually, but litigation could drag on for a year, maybe 2. Legal fees alone could drain the estate." Sybil looked out the window at Millbrook's small Main Street, the hardware store, the diner, the church where she and Kenneth had been married. "What do I do?" she asked quietly. Marcus hesitated. "You could settle, offer him a smaller percentage, 20% maybe, enough to make him go away." "And let him win?" "It's not about winning, Sybil. It's about protecting what you and Kenneth built." Sybil stood. "I need to think." She drove home slowly, her mind spinning. By the time she pulled into the driveway, she'd made up her mind. She wasn't going to fight Jasper in court. She was going to make sure there was nothing left to fight over. That evening, The phone call. Sibyl sat in Kenneth's workshop, surrounded by his tools, his half-finished projects, the smell of sawdust and machine oil. She pulled out her old address book and found the number she was looking for. The phone rang 3 times. Hello? Sharon? This is Sibyl Blackwood. Sibyl? Sharon Fletcher's voice was warm, surprised. My God, it's been years. How are you? I need your help, Sibyl said. You still do that non-profit work? Agricultural land trusts? A pause. Yes. Why? Because I want to give my farm away, Sibyl said quietly. And I need you to show me how. Sharon Fletcher arrived 3 days later, driving a dusty Honda with a cracked windshield and a bumper sticker that read Farms Feed Cities. She stepped out wearing jeans, work boots, and a flannel shirt that had seen better decades, her gray hair pulled back in a practical braid. She looked exactly the same as she had in 1983, when she and Sibyl had shared a dorm room at the University of Vermont for exactly 1 semester before Sibyl dropped out to marry Kenneth. 41 years, Sharon said, pulling Sibyl into a hug that smelled like coffee and wood smoke. You look good, Sib. You're a terrible liar, Sibyl said, but she smiled. Come on, I made coffee. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Jasper had thrown his plate 5 years ago, though Sibyl had replaced the dishes. Sharon spread papers across the surface, articles, legal documents, case studies of farms that had been converted into agricultural trusts. So, Sharon said, pouring cream into her mug, tell me what you're thinking. Sibyl explained. The will, Jasper's claim, the lawsuit that was coming. Sharon listened without interrupting, her eyes sharp. When Sibyl finished, Sharon sat back and studied her old friend. You want to do this to protect the land, Sharon said slowly. Or to punish your son? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sibyl looked out the window at the walnut trees, their bare branches stark against the gray November sky. I don't know anymore, she admitted. Maybe both. Does it matter? Yes, Sharon said. Because if you're doing this out of spite, you'll regret it. But if you're doing it because the land deserves better than being divided up and sold off, she tapped the papers, then this is the right move. Tell me how it works. Sharon pulled out a diagram. You create a non-profit organization, the Blackwood Agricultural Heritage Trust. You transfer ownership of the entire property to the trust. You remain as the managing trustee for life, which means you still live here, still make all the decisions, still run the farm exactly as you always have. But I don't own it anymore. No, the trust owns it. And when you die, the trust continues. It can't be inherited. It can't be sold for profit. Its mission is education, preservation, sustainability, whatever you define in the charter. Sibyl traced her finger along the diagram. And Jasper? Can't touch it. You can't sue a nonprofit for inheritance rights. Once the property is transferred, his claim becomes legally meaningless. How long does it take? 3 weeks if we move fast. But Sibyl, Sharon leaned forward. Once you do this, there's no going back. You're not just taking away Jasper's claim. You're taking away your own. You'll never be able to leave this land to anyone. Not to family, not to friends. It belongs to the mission. Sibyl thought about Kenneth's journal. She earned it. But earned it for what? To hoard it? To die alone in a big house on land that would be carved up and sold the day she was in the ground? Or to make it mean something? Let's do it, she said. 2 weeks later, the paperwork was staggering. Articles of incorporation, IRS Form 1023 for tax-exempt status, property transfer documents, mission statements, bylaws, educational program outlines. Sibyl worked late into the night, reading every word, signing her name so many times her hand cramped. Marcus Dalton reviewed everything with a lawyer's skepticism but found no holes. It's bulletproof, he said finally. Once this is filed, Jasper's lawsuit is dead on arrival. Then file it, Sibyl said. The Blackwood Agricultural Heritage Trust was registered with the state of Vermont on November 28, 2024. Total assets, 1,200 acres, 3 barns, 1 farmhouse, equipment valued at approximately $180,000, and 40-year-old walnut orchards appraised at $2.4 million. Owner, none. Beneficiary, the future. Sybil stood in Kenneth's workshop the night the papers were filed, holding the copy of the trust certificate. The old workshop smelled like sawdust and WD-40 in memory. "I gave it back, Kenneth," she whispered to the empty room. "Like you always said we should." A week later, the process server found Jasper at an extended-stay motel outside Phoenix and handed him the notification that his lawsuit had been dismissed. The property in question no longer existed as inheritable estate. According to Gloria, who had a cousin who knew someone who knew Jasper's lawyer, Jasper had put his fist through the motel room wall. December 15th, 2024. The recording. Marcus called Sybil on a Tuesday morning, his voice tight with controlled excitement. "You need to come to my office, now." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Just come." When Sybil arrived, she found Marcus sitting with a man she didn't recognize, late 30s, nervous hands, wearing a John Deere cap. "Sybil," Marcus said, "this is Tyler Hammond. He's an old friend of Jasper's." Tyler stood, shook her hand with a grip that was too firm, compensating for anxiety. "Ma'am, I have something you need to hear." He pulled out his phone, set it on Marcus's desk, and pressed play. At first, Sybil heard only static and muffled voices. Then, "Don't care about the damn farm. I just need the cash to pay you back." Jasper's voice, angry, slurred slightly. "Drunk." A woman's voice responded. "And if your mother won't sell?" "She's old, stubborn, but she'll cave. She always does. I'll contest the will, drag it out, make it expensive. Eventually she'll settle just to make it stop." "You better be right, Jasper. I fronted you $200,000 based on your guarantee." "I know what you fronted me, Vanessa. I'm not an idiot." "Then stop acting like one. This is business. You promised me that land. My investors are waiting." The recording cut off. Sybil sat very still, her hands folded in her lap. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "How did you get this?" Marcus asked. "Butt dial," Tyler said. "About 3 weeks ago. Jasper called me by accident while he was arguing with that Sterling woman. I almost deleted it, but..." He looked at Sybil. "I knew Jasper back when he was a good guy, ma'am, before everything went south. This ain't about the farm for him. It's about debt, and I thought you should know." "Can we use this in court?" Sybil asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "It's legal. Inadvertent recording, no expectation of privacy. It proves motive. That Jasper's claim isn't about family legacy, it's about profit and debt repayment. It completely undermines his case." "There is no case anymore," Sybil said. "I transferred the property." "True, but Jasper doesn't know about Tyler yet. And if he tries to spin this in the press, make you look like the villain, this recording tells the real story." Sybil looked at Tyler. "Why are you helping me?" Tyler removed his cap, turned it in his hands. "Because Jasper and I were partners once, in a startup that failed. I lost money too, but I didn't..." He trailed off. "I didn't turn mean, I guess. He changed, ma'am. I don't know if it was the drinking or the debt or what, but the guy I knew, he wouldn't have done what he did to you." Sybil stood, walked to the window. Outside, Millbrook was decorated for Christmas. Lights strung across Main Street, wreaths on every lamppost. "Keep the recording," she said finally. "If he comes at me, we'll use it. But I won't fire the first shot." The lawsuit Jasper filed before learning about the trust didn't technically exist anymore, but his lawyer, a sharp young man named Liam Costa, who wore expensive suits and had never set foot on a farm, insisted on a hearing anyway. "My client was defrauded," Liam argued to anyone who'd listen. Mrs. Blackwood transferred assets to deliberately circumvent inheritance law. Marcus filed a motion to dismiss, but Judge Patricia Sawyer, a gray-haired woman in her 60s who ran her courtroom like a ship, decided to hear arguments. "Let's settle this once and for all," she said. The hearing was set for January 14th, 2025. The morning of the hearing, Sybil woke at 5 a.m., made coffee she didn't drink, and stood on her porch watching the sun rise over the walnut orchard. The trees were still bare, patient, waiting for spring. Gloria arrived at 7 to drive her to the courthouse. Sharon came too, carrying a briefcase full of documentation about agricultural land trusts, tax law, estate precedent. "You ready?" Gloria asked. "No," Sybil said. "Let's go anyway." Chittenden County Courthouse. The courtroom smelled like floor polish and old wood. Sybil sat beside Marcus at the plaintiff's table, though technically she was the defendant now. Across the aisle, Jasper sat with Liam Costa and Vanessa Sterling, who apparently had enough stake in this to show up personally. Sybil hadn't seen her son this close in 2 months. He looked worse, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, his suit hanging loose on his frame. When their eyes met for just a second, he looked away. Judge Sawyer entered. Everyone stood. "Be seated. We're here on the matter of Blackwood vs. Blackwood Estate. Mr. Costa, you may begin." Liam Costa stood, buttoning his jacket with theatrical precision. "Your Honor, this is a simple case of fraudulent transfer. Mrs. Sybil Blackwood, knowing that her son, the sole biological heir of Kenneth Blackwood, had a rightful claim to the family property, deliberately transferred said property to a non-profit organization to circumvent inheritance law." He gestured to Jasper. "My client is a 35-year-old man who grew up on that farm. He has memories there, history there, roots there. His father's will may have excluded him, but we believe that will was executed under undue influence during Mr. Blackwood's final illness." "Do you have evidence of undue influence?" Judge Sawyer interrupted. "We have the timing, Your Honor. The will was changed a mere 2 months before Kenneth Blackwood's death, during a period when his Parkinson's disease had significantly progressed. Medical records indicate Kenneth Blackwood's cognitive function remained intact until his death," Marcus interjected, standing. "Dr. Raymond Hughes will testify to that if needed." Judge Sawyer made a note. "Continue, Mr. Costa." "Regardless of the will's validity," Liam said, "the transfer to a non-profit was designed solely to prevent my client from accessing his rightful inheritance." "That's fraud, Your Honor." "Mr. Dalton," the judge said. "Your response?" Marcus stood slowly. He didn't have Liam's theatrical flair, but his voice carried the weight of 40 years practicing law in Vermont. "Your Honor, Mrs. Blackwood had every legal right to transfer her property that was solely hers after Mr. Blackwood's death, to any organization she chose. The Blackwood Agricultural Heritage Trust is a legitimate 501(c)(3) nonprofit with a clear educational mission. There was no fraud. There was a widow making a choice about her own land." "The timing is suspicious," Liam countered. "The timing is irrelevant," Marcus said. "Even if Jasper Blackwood had a valid claim, which he doesn't because the will is sound, property owners in Vermont have the right to donate, sell, or transfer their assets at any time. Should we invalidate every deathbed donation to charity because someone's relative might have wanted the money?" Judge Sawyer leaned back. "Mr. Costa, do you have any evidence that Mrs. Blackwood transferred the property specifically to defraud your client? Any communications, emails, recorded statements? The actions speak for themselves. That's not evidence, that's speculation." The judge looked at Jasper. "Mr. Blackwood, do you want to address the court?" Jasper stood. For a moment he just stood there, and Sybil saw something flicker across his face. Uncertainty, maybe, or shame. "Your Honor, He cleared his throat. "That farm is my family's legacy. My great-grandfather cleared that land. My father planted those trees. I grew up there, and now I'm being told I have no claim to any of it because my mother gave it away to strangers." "The trust will serve the community," Sharon said quietly from the gallery. "It's not going to strangers, it's going to the future." Judge Sawyer silenced her with a look. "Ms. Fletcher, you'll have your turn if I call you." She turned back to Jasper. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm sympathetic to your situation, but your father's will was clear, and your mother's transfer of her own property she owned outright, was legal. Unless you can prove fraud or undue influence with actual evidence, not just feelings, I don't see grounds to proceed." Liam Costa stood. "Your Honor, we have reason to believe—" "Mr. Dalton," the judge interrupted, "I assume you have Kenneth Blackwood's will, Medical records and trust documentation? Yes, Your Honor. Marcus handed a folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. Judge Sawyer read in silence for 3 full minutes. The courtroom waited. Finally, she looked up. The will is valid. The medical records support cognitive capacity. The trust is properly formed and legally sound. She closed the folder. Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry for your loss, both of your father and of the inheritance you hoped for. But the law is clear. Your mother had every right to do what she did. Your Honor, Liam began. I'm not finished. Judge Sawyer's voice sharpened. I'm also troubled by the timing of this lawsuit. Your client waited until his father's funeral, to show up with legal claims. That speaks to motive, Mr. Costa. Marcus stood. Your Honor, if I may, we have evidence regarding Mr. Blackwood's true motives. He pulled out a small recording device, set it on the table. Jasper's face went white. This is a recording obtained legally by a third party, Tyler Hammond, a former business associate of Mr. Blackwood. It was an inadvertent pocket dial. I'd like the court to hear it. Objection, Liam said. Relevance? Overruled. Play it. Marcus pressed play. Jasper's voice filled the courtroom. I don't care about the damn farm. I just need the cash to pay you back. Sybil watched her son's face as his own words convicted him. Watched Vanessa Sterling shift uncomfortably in her seat. Watched Liam Costa's jaw tighten. When the recording ended, the silence was absolute. Judge Sawyer looked at Jasper. Do you owe Ms. Sterling $200,000, Mr. Blackwood? Jasper didn't answer. I'll take that as a yes. She shook her head. This isn't about family legacy. This is about debt collection. And you tried to use the court system to extract money from your own mother. Your Honor, my client's financial situation doesn't... It speaks to motive, Mr. Costa, and frankly, it disgusts me. Judge Sawyer picked up her gavel. The claim is dismissed. The trust stands. And Mr. Blackwood, if you ever file a frivolous lawsuit in my courtroom again, I'll sanction you personally. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. Outside the courthouse, Sybil walked out into the cold January afternoon with Marcus and Sharon on either side of her. Behind them, she could hear Liam Costa arguing with Jasper in a low, angry voice. Gloria was waiting by the car, her face anxious. Well? We won, Sharon said simply. Gloria pulled Sybil into a hug. Thank God. But Sybil didn't feel victorious. She felt hollow. She looked back at the courthouse doors just as Jasper emerged. Vanessa Sterling was already walking toward a waiting car, her phone pressed to her ear. She didn't look back. Jasper stood alone on the steps, his hands in his pockets, looking smaller than he'd ever looked before. For just a moment, their eyes met. Sybil thought about walking over, thought about saying something, though she didn't know what. But then Marcus touched her elbow gently. Come on, Syb. Let's get you home. She got in the car. Behind them, Jasper watched them drive away. 2 months later, March 2025, spring came slowly to Vermont that year. The snow melted in patches, revealing dead grass and mud before the first green shoots appeared. Sybil spent her mornings working with Sharon to set up the Trust's first educational program, a summer internship for local high school students interested in sustainable agriculture. 12 applications came in the first week. By the second week, they had 27. People want this, Sharon said, spreading the applications across Sybil's kitchen table. They want to learn. Sybil felt something she hadn't felt in months. Purpose. The trust was working. The land was being used, and she was still here, still tending it. But now it meant something beyond her own small life. The letter, on a Tuesday morning in late March, Sybil found an envelope tucked between the storm door and the frame. No stamp, no postmark. Just her name written in handwriting she recognized immediately. She stood on the porch for a long moment before opening it. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect anything. But I needed to write this because I've been sober for 47 days now, and one of the steps is making amends, even when you know they won't be accepted. I saw the article in the Gazette about the trust. About the internship program. I read that you're teaching workshops on sustainable farming practices. I know I don't deserve to ask, but I need to do something right. I've been living with what I did. To you, to Dad's memory, to everything, and I can't carry it anymore. I'm not asking to come home. I'm not asking for money or land or anything else. I'm just asking if I can help. With the farm, with the program, whatever you need. Not for me. Just to do something that matters. I understand if you say no. I understand if you don't respond at all. I just wanted you to know I'm trying to be better than who I was. Jasper Sybil read the letter 3 times, standing in the cold morning air. Then she folded it carefully, walked inside, and placed it in Kenneth's old desk drawer. She didn't respond. Not that day, but she didn't throw it away either. 1 week later, Sybil was repairing a section of fence near the north orchard when she heard a car coming up the drive. She looked up, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. An old pickup truck, not the expensive sedan from the funeral, but a beat-up Ford with a cracked windshield, pulled to a stop near the barn. Jasper got out. He was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, both worn and faded. His hair was longer, unstyled. He looked like he'd lost weight, but his eyes were clearer than she'd seen them in years. He walked over slowly, stopping a few feet away from the fence line. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi," Sybil replied. They stood in silence for a moment. A breeze moved through the walnut trees, carrying the smell of thawed earth and coming rain. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here," Jasper said. "Where else would I be?" Another silence. "Can I—" He gestured at the fence. "Can I help with that?" Sybil looked at the sagging fence line, at the posts' paws that needed replacing, at the wire that needed stretching tight. It was work for 2 people. "You remember how?" she asked. "Dad taught me when I was 12. Sybil handed him a pair of wire cutters. They worked side by side for 2 hours, mostly in silence. Jasper made mistakes, forgot how to tie the proper knots, had to be shown twice how to tension the wire correctly, but he listened. He learned. He didn't complain. When the sun started to sink toward the hills, casting long shadows across the orchard, they finished the last post. Jasper wiped sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. "That's good fence," he said. "It'll hold," Sybil agreed. He gathered the tools, loaded them back into the truck bed without being asked. Then he turned to face her. "Can I come back tomorrow?" he asked. Sybil looked at her son, thinner, older, humbled by life in ways she'd never wished for him. "Gates open at 6, she said. Jasper nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." He climbed into the truck and drove away, dust rising behind him in the fading light. Sybil stood alone in the orchard, watching until the truck disappeared around the bend in the road. Then she walked back to the house, made herself dinner, and sat at the kitchen table with Kenneth's journal open in front of her. She picked up a pen and wrote a single line. "He came back. I don't know if it means anything yet." But he came back. Jasper came back the next morning at 6 sharp. And the morning after that. And the one after that. He didn't ask for a room in the house. He slept in his truck the first week, parked behind the old equipment barn where Sybil wouldn't see it from the kitchen window. But she knew. She saw the blanket folded in the cab, the gallon jug of water, the pillow pressed against the passenger door. On the 8th day, she left a key on the porch railing with a note. "Cabin behind the south barn needs work. Roof leaks. Yours if you fix it." The key was gone by noon. Date: April 2025. The Trust's first cohort of interns arrived on a Saturday morning. 6 high school students from Millbrook and the surrounding towns, all wide-eyed and unsure, clutching notebooks and wearing brand-new work gloves that hadn't yet molded to their hands. Sybil stood on the porch and watched them gather near the barn. Sharon was there too, clipboard in hand, organizing them into pairs for the morning's work. Soil testing, compost management, irrigation system maintenance. Jasper emerged from the cabin he'd been rebuilding, his shirt already streaked with the brown-gray dust of old insulation. He stopped when he saw the students, hanging back near the barn door, like he wasn't sure if he belonged. One of the students, a tall, freckled girl with her hair in 2 braids, noticed him and waved. "You Mr. Blackwood's son?" Jasper hesitated. "Yeah." "Cool. My mom said you went to state for engineering. I'm thinking about applying there." "It's a good school," Jasper said carefully. The girl, her name tag read Nora Whitley, pulled out a notebook. "We're supposed to map the irrigation system today. Mrs. Fletcher said it's pretty old. You know how it works?" Jasper glanced at Sybil on the porch. She was watching him, her expression unreadable. "Yeah," he said finally. "I know how it works. Can you show us?" He looked at the group of students, all watching him with that particular teenage mix of skepticism and hope, waiting to see if he was someone worth listening to. "Get your notebooks," Jasper said, "and some water. We'll be walking the full perimeter." Sybil watched them head out across the field, Jasper in the lead, the students trailing behind, Nora firing questions faster than he could answer them. Sharon climbed the porch steps and stood beside her. "He's good with them." "He used to be good with everything," Sybil said quietly. "Before. Maybe he's finding his way back to that." Maybe? 6 weeks later, mid-May, the Millbrook Community Center smelled like burnt coffee and the particular mustiness of church basements everywhere. Folding chairs were arranged in a circle. A banner on the wall read, "One day at a time." Jasper sat in the back row, his hands folded in his lap, listening to a man named Dennis talk about almost relapsing at his daughter's wedding. "But I didn't," Dennis said, his voice steady, "because I called my sponsor, and I remembered why I was doing this." After the meeting, the group leader, a woman in her 50s named Karen, who'd been sober for 17 years, called Jasper to the front. 3 months, she said, handing him a bronze chip. 90 days. That's the hardest stretch, Jasper. You made it. Jasper turned the chip over in his palm. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more weight than just metal. "Thanks," he said. "You got anyone to celebrate with?" Karen asked. Jasper thought about the cabin, about the quiet evenings working on repairs, about the interns who'd started calling him Jazz instead of Mr. Blackwood. "Yeah," he said. "I think I do." That evening, Sybil was sitting on the porch when Jasper's truck pulled up. She'd been reading one of Kenneth's old farming journals, the pages yellowed and fragile, but she set it aside when she saw him walking toward her. He was carrying something, a small box. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Always got minutes," Sybil said. "Not much else at my age." Jasper almost smiled. He sat down on the porch steps, not quite beside her, but close enough. He opened the box. Inside was the bronze chip. 3 months sober, he said. "They give you these, to mark the time." Sybil looked at the chip but didn't touch it. "That's good, Jasper. I wanted you to know I'm not just saying I'm trying. I'm actually doing it." "I can see that." They sat in silence for a moment. The evening air was cool, carrying the scent of turned earth and the distant sweetness of wild honeysuckle. "Why'd you let me come back?" Jasper asked suddenly. "After everything I did, after the lawsuit, after—" He didn't finish. Sybil was quiet for a long time. A bird called from the walnut orchard, and another answered. "Because the land forgives faster than people," she said finally. "Kenneth used to say that. And I figured if the land could have you back, maybe I could learn to as well." Jasper's hands tightened around the chip. "I don't know if I deserve—" "Stop!" Sybil interrupted, her voice sharp. "Stop talking about what you deserve. I'm tired of hearing it. You're here. You're working. You're sober. That's what matters now." "I need to say something," Jasper said, his voice low. "Something I should have said 5 years ago." Sybil waited. Jasper stared out at the orchard, at the trees his great-grandfather had cleared the land for. His grandfather had planted. His father had tended. "I blamed you and Dad for my failures because it was easier than blaming myself," he said. "You didn't force me into engineering. I chose it. I chose it because I was scared. Scared of disappointing you. Scared of being broke. scared of being different from everyone else. He turned to look at her, his eyes bright with tears he was trying not to shed. And when it all fell apart, when the jobs didn't work out, when Madison left, when I couldn't pay my debts, I convinced myself it was your fault, because if it was your fault, then I didn't have to look at my own choices. Sybil's throat was tight. She'd imagined this conversation 1,000 times over 5 years, but hearing it now in his voice, with the weight of real regret behind it, that was different. The truth is, Jasper's voice cracked, I hit you because I hated myself, and I've hated myself every day since. The words hung in the cooling air. Sybil felt tears on her own cheeks and didn't wipe them away. I've asked myself 1,000 times if we pushed too hard, she said quietly. If we didn't listen enough. If we made you think you couldn't choose your own path. You didn't let me finish. Sybil's voice was gentle but firm. Maybe we did push. Maybe we let our fears for your future override your own dreams. I don't know anymore. But Jasper, you can't blame us for choices you made as an adult. At some point you have to own your life, the good and the bad. Jasper nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm not asking you to forget what happened, he said. I'm not asking for things to go back to how they were. I know that's not possible. Then what are you asking? Can I stay? The question came out barely above a whisper. Not in the house, not in your life like before. Just here, on the land, doing the work. Sybil looked at her son, at the gray starting at his temples, at the lines around his eyes, at the calluses forming on his hands from honest labor. You can stay, she said, but you earn it every day. Yes, ma'am. They sat together as the sun dropped below the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The walnut trees stood silent and patient, the way they'd stood for 40 years, waiting for spring, for growth, for time to do its slow work of healing. June 2025. The Blackwood Agricultural Heritage Trust's first summer program was by any measure a success. The 6 original interns had grown to 12 as word spread. Students came from as far as Burlington to spend their weekends learning about sustainable agriculture, water conservation, organic pest management. Sybil taught most of the workshops herself, standing in the barn with dirt under her fingernails and Kenneth's old diagrams pinned to the walls, explaining the difference between loam and clay, between nitrogen-fixing plants and nutrient-hungry ones. But increasingly, it was Jasper they turned to for the technical questions. How do we automate the irrigation without electricity? Nora Whitley asked one Saturday morning, her notebook already half filled with sketches. Jasper had been working on exactly that problem for 3 weeks. He spread his drawings across the workbench, a gravity-fed system with rainwater collection, using the natural slope of the land to create pressure. It's all about elevation, he explained. Water flows downhill. We just need to help it along. That's brilliant, Nora said. Did you design this? Yeah, Jasper looked almost embarrassed. It's what I studied for. Engineering. Just never thought I'd use it for something like this. Why not? Because I thought I needed to do something bigger, flashier. Turns out the small stuff matters more. By mid-June, Jasper had designed 3 new systems for the farm. The irrigation automation, a solar-powered cooling system for the equipment barn, and a rainwater harvesting setup that cut the farm's water costs by 40%. Sharon Fletcher was impressed enough to suggest he document the designs. Other farms could use this, she said. You should write it up, maybe start a blog or something. Jasper hesitated. I don't know if anyone would care. Try it anyway. So he did. He started a blog called Second Growth, a gardening term for trees that grow back after clear cutting, but also a reference to second chances. He wrote about sustainable farm design, about using engineering for conservation, about finding purpose in small, practical solutions. The first month, he had 37 readers. By the second month, he had 300. A woman from a farm in upstate New York emailed to ask if she could use his rainwater system design. A graduate student from Cornell asked to interview him for a thesis on appropriate technology in agriculture. Jasper showed Sybil the emails one evening, still amazed. "People are actually reading this." "Of course they are," Sybil said. "You're good at what you do." "I didn't think I was good at anything anymore." "You forgot," Sybil said. "There's a difference." 10. July 2025. The summer heat settled over Vermont like a blanket. The walnut trees were fully leafed now, their branches heavy with green nuts that wouldn't be ready for harvest until October. Sybil spent her mornings in the garden, her afternoons in the shade of the porch, her evenings walking the property with a cane Kenneth had carved from walnut wood 20 years ago. She was 71 now. Her heart medication kept the arrhythmia under control, but Dr. Hughes had been clear. Slow down, rest more, let others do the heavy lifting. So she did, and increasingly, others meant Jasper. He had rebuilt the cabin into something livable. New roof, insulated walls, a small wood stove for winter. He lived simply. A cot, a desk for his laptop, shelves made from scrap lumber where he kept his AA books and engineering manuals. But he wasn't alone as much anymore. One Sunday, Sybil noticed a second vehicle parked near the cabin, a little Honda with an I Hearts Teaching bumper sticker. At dinner that evening, Jasper had started joining her twice a week, awkward but regular. She asked about it. "You got company?" Jasper looked up from his plate. "Her name's Emma Reyes. She teaches 4th grade at Millbrook Elementary. We met at the farm festival in June. She nice?" "Very." "She know about all of it, yeah." Jasper set down his fork. "I told her everything. The drinking, the lawsuit, what I did to you. Figured she deserved to know before she decided if she wanted to stick around." "And she stuck around?" "So far." Sybil nodded slowly. "Bring her for dinner next week. I should meet her properly." Jasper looked genuinely surprised. "You sure?" "I'm sure." The final scene. Late July. On the last Sunday in July, Sybil and Jasper planted new walnut saplings along the western edge of the property. The ground was hard from the heat, and it took both of them working together to dig the holes deep enough. Sybil worked slowly, leaning on her cane between trees. Jasper did most of the digging, but he waited for her to position each sapling, to pat the soil firm around the roots. "These won't bear fruit for 15 years, Sybil said, standing back to look at the row of small trees, each one barely taller than her waist. "Then we better take care of them," Jasper replied. They worked in comfortable silence as the sun moved across the sky. When the last tree was planted and watered, they stood together looking out over the farm, the old orchard in full leaf, the barn with its new solar panels, the cabin where Jasper lived, the house where Sybil had spent 43 years of her life. "Dad would have liked this," Jasper said quietly. "What you did with the trust, what it's becoming. He would have liked having you back more." Jasper was quiet for a moment. "You think he'd forgive me?" "I think he already did, long before you came back." Sybil turned to face her son. "Kenneth understood making mistakes. He made plenty of his own. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry." "So tell him." Sybil gestured at the orchard, at the land. "He's here, in every tree, every fence post, every acre. Just talk." Jasper looked out at the farm, at the legacy his father had left, and nodded. They walked back to the house together as the light turned golden, their shadows long on the ground behind them. May 2027, the Blackwood Agricultural Heritage Trust's 3rd annual Farm Heritage Festival drew over 200 people. Families spread blankets under the walnut trees. Kids ran through the orchard playing tag. Vendors sold fresh produce and handmade crafts. Sybil stood on the porch watching it all, leaning on Kenneth's cane, a cup of lemonade in her free hand. At 73, she moved slower, spoke quieter, but her eyes were still sharp. Sharon Fletcher climbed the porch steps, slightly out of breath. "You should give the welcome speech." "That's your job. It's your farm." "Not anymore," Sybil said with a small smile. It's the trust's farm. I'm just the stubborn old woman who won't leave. Then be the stubborn old woman who gives a speech. So Sybil did. She stood on the makeshift stage, boards laid across hay bales, and looked out at the crowd. Faces she knew and faces she didn't. Young and old. People who'd lived in Millbrook their whole lives, and people who'd driven 2 hours to be here. 43 years ago, she began, her voice carrying across the field. My husband Kenneth and I bought this land with everything we had. We thought we were buying property. Turns out we were just borrowing it. People listened. Land doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. We're stewards, not owners. And if we're lucky, we get to pass it on. Not to our children necessarily, but to the future. To people who'll care for it the way we did. Maybe better. She paused, her eyes finding Jasper in the crowd. He was standing with Emma, her hand in his, both of them listening. This trust isn't about me. It's not about my family. It's about making sure this land keeps teaching, keeps growing, keeps giving, long after I'm gone. She finished to genuine applause and carefully made her way down from the stage. Gloria was there to steady her elbow. That was beautiful, Gloria said. It was true, Sybil replied. That evening after the festival ended, after the vendors packed up and the families drove away, after the volunteers finished cleaning and Sharon headed back to Burlington, Sybil sat on the porch with Jasper and Emma. Emma was 32, with warm brown skin and kind eyes, teaching summer school but spending her weekends helping at the farm. She fit here in a way that made Sybil think of herself 40 years ago, willing to work, willing to learn, willing to stay. Emma asked me something, Jasper said, his voice careful. And I wanted to talk to you about it first. All right. Jasper glanced at Emma, who gave him an encouraging nod. She asked if I wanted to move forward. With her. With us. It took Sybil a moment to understand. Then she saw the way Emma's hand rested over Jasper's, saw the small smile on her son's face. You're getting married, Sybil said. If that's okay, Emma added quickly. We know it's complicated with everything that's happened. It's not complicated, Sybil interrupted gently. It's life, and life should move forward. Jasper's shoulders relaxed. We're not planning anything big, just small. Here maybe, if you'd let us. This land is for living on, Sybil said. Of course you can. Later, after Emma had gone home and Jasper was getting ready to leave, Sybil stopped him at the porch steps. Wait here, she said. She went inside and climbed the stairs slowly to her bedroom. From the nightstand drawer, she pulled out Kenneth's watch, the one he'd worn every day for 35 years, the one that had stopped working the day he died, and that she'd never had the heart to fix. She came back downstairs and held it out to Jasper. Your father would have wanted you to have this. Jasper took the watch carefully, his hands trembling slightly. Mom, I can't. Yes, you can. It doesn't work anymore. Hasn't for 3 years. But maybe that's fitting. She closed his fingers around it. You can't go back to how things were, but you can carry the best parts forward. Jasper pulled her into a hug, the first real hug they'd shared in 7 years. Sybil held on tight, feeling how much taller he was, how much older they'd both become. Thank you, he whispered, for the second chance. Thank the land, Sybil said. I just kept the gates open. 1 month later, planting day. The wedding was small and simple, 20 people under the walnut trees, Gloria officiating because she'd gotten ordained online for exactly this purpose, Nora and 2 other interns serving as ushers. Emma wore a simple white dress. Jasper wore his father's watch, newly repaired. Sybil sat in the front row and cried quiet tears, for joy, for grief, for all the years between the breaking and the mending. After the ceremony, after the cake was cut and the toasts were made, Sybil found Jasper standing alone at the edge of the orchard, looking out at the land. You all right? She asked. Yeah. He turned to her. I keep thinking Dad should be here. He is here. Sybil touched the trunk of the nearest walnut tree. Every tree we planted, every fence we mended, every choice we made, He's in all of it. Jasper nodded. I wish I'd understood that sooner. You understand it now. That's what matters. They stood together in the shade of the trees, mother and son, both older and wiser and scarred in ways that would never fully heal. But healing enough, the land stretched out around them, patient and forgiving, the way land always is for those who learn to tend it properly. And that, Sybil thought, was more than enough.